Susan, do you want to tell us anything about any meetings, Christmas party?
They did that already.
She
Or
just
did we cover that already?
It's done.
It's done. Okay, sorry. I think we're best to just have Steve kick us off then.
I'm just Steve. Steve, I'm going to go real quick just before you start. Jamie Kane is on at what, 2 o'clock today? Anyone verify that? 2 o'clock. Okay. So make sure you tune into that because the city's proposing new legislation to have everybody registered for a licensing program to manage properties. And they also have in that legislation, they can kick you out. So you're not going to manage properties anymore. So they want contact information for every single property, every single owner, which I understand that for 911 purposes and major issues. Yeah, cities should have a list of who's taking care of who's running certain properties with out of state, out of country owners. No problem with that. But the legislation goes pretty far, pretty intense. And as far as how do you monitor, how do you grade that, how do you discipline? I just think it's territory they're going in is not good. So there's 15 of us on the panel. We're going to meet with the city tomorrow, but Jamie's going to talk about that today at 2 o'clock. So I think it'd be really good to tune into that. And before Steve starts, is there any general questions at all about landlording, current issues, anything going on? Okay. So it seems like every day it changes. There's always something new coming up, and it's hard to follow. So at this time, if there's nothing going on, I'll turn over to Steve. And thank you, Steve, for coming.
Hey, Pat, I do have just one general question and wondered if you had any information on it. And I actually approached Steve with this a couple of days ago, but the question was COVID waivers for C of O inspections. Have you done any of those? Do we know if those are actually solidified for 3 years and what the transferability factor is of those? Anybody
Yes.
have insight to those?
Yeah, we're doing them, and they're good for 3 years. And as far as I know, they're definitely transferable. But if the property has prior or previous violations, you can't do it. And even if if there's violations on the property and you just purchased a property, they're still going to go back to the previous violation, so you can't do it. And the city is a little bit unorganized with lead tests, inspection dates and times. I don't know about you, but they're missing times. They're missing lead tests.
I agree with all that.
Yeah, city inspectors will, apparently you can have one person in the house when they come through to do an interior inspection, whether lead tests or code check. There can be one person in the house. The problem we're running into is each inspector is different. Some inspectors don't care if there's 20 people in there. Some don't want anybody in there. And we have quite a bit of families where the kids are on Zoom for school and they can't go outside for 10 minutes. They can't go outside for 15 minutes. And the city's given pushback, but so that's been really holding us up a little bit. These inspections are going very slow. Again, there's no consistency, and I'm not so much as blaming the inspectors because I think it's a little bit of everything that's the cause of it. But just keep in mind that's a challenge that we're facing. And too, Interstate, who does third-party lead tests, Joe Peralta, Jim and Joe. So they are not going to, or they're not allowed to do inspections for, I believe, 6 months. They've just been suspended for 6 months for an issue with some lead tests. So they're one of the main third-party lead tests a lot of us used. Right. I know there's a few other people I know, but so it's kind of sad because they were always very responsive for us.
Yes.
Now, when you say if there are any violations that they won't do it that way, are you talking about current violations or if the house has ever had a violation?
Current violations that could have been in the past that have never been cleared up.
Okay.
Or complaint case. If there's a complaint case, they have to go into.
Okay. And Pat, have you ever had this situation where if you're trying to sell a property and it's not within that 2-year window, but you've got a person that's got COVID inside to try to get the waiver to then make the C of O transferable?
I've tried to do the waiver regardless of violations and COVID and all that because the city's not consistent. So if I can slide a couple through, great. So it's a case by case basis, especially when you get the 4-family homes too. First, they can take the waiver, not go in, and then they're telling me now that they have to go in at least 1 unit in a 4-family. 3 families, they're fine, but 4 families, they have to go in 1 unit. So we virtually told the owner, you're good. The city inspector says we're good, and then we get a phone call 2 weeks later saying I have to get inside. What are you talking about? You have to get inside, So just be prepared for that. They're just.
I agree with the inconsistency, and again, it's sort of inspector by inspector.
Yep. And,
Thank you.
yep. No problem.
I'm finding the C of O issue is an issue where there's a bank involved, much more than where there's not a bank involved. We seem to be making deals where there's not a bank involved and giving the purchaser a credit, but where there's a bank involved, they insist on a certificate of occupancy. Eastman Savings and Loan insists on a certificate of occupancy, even for single families where they're going to be owner occupied. They insist that there be one. So it's very problematic. I've been telling my clients, if they're going to buy in the city, that they should not go to ESNL for their mortgages, which is kind of unique because usually ESNL is the easiest bank to play with. So it's just interesting how this affects the lending situation. So I've been given a couple of questions, but does anyone have a question that they specifically want to ask? Well, why don't we start with what's going on with landlord tenants with the court system. So last week, the city courts apparently went completely virtual for evictions. And since the courts are now at 25% capacity, what that's led to is that if you file an eviction today, you will get an email giving you a date at some point within the next day or two for an eviction to take place in February. They are scheduling 2 months out. The tenant has to appear, but they have to appear virtually now. So that means they have to be represented by a lawyer. So they're being given a lawyer either with legal aid or with Law New York. The problem with that is that both of those offices are closed. They're working from home. So there's just no really good answer. The town courts are even worse. They are sending all of their cases now to county court. So you never actually will be appearing in a town court. The county court gives you a date. And just recently, the county court has discontinued any evictions for town courts. And I understand that that's going to be for 6 months. It is also probable that that Cuomo is going to extend, and we're not going to be able to do evictions for a longer period of time. In any event, that if on the rare situations where I've heard people have gotten warrants, they're almost impossible to have the warrant issued. They're impossible to get the marshal to actually serve it. And I just heard of a case where the marshal served it, the marshal showed up at the house, and advocacy groups surrounded the house with a ring of people holding hands so that the marshal could not go into the house to serve the warrant. The police were called, and the police were not willing to get involved. They were not willing to help the marshal in any way. So the eviction warrant was not served. And interestingly enough, I've heard of cases where the police show up with the tenant, helping a tenant get back into a house where there's been some type of a warrant or an eviction, and threatened the landlord with criminal an arrest if they don't allow the tenant back in. So all in all, none of the eviction stuff is good news. Any questions about evictions?
I'm gonna go back to bed. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, really. I don't disagree. So now let's get back to what I'd actually rather talk about, which is closings. And closings are much more interesting now. The biggest problem that we have is that title companies that are writing title insurance for lawyers are intensely backed up, and they're taking a couple of weeks sometimes instead of a couple of days. And the other problem is that there just aren't enough surveyors. I understand that a number of surveyors have retired. They just said that this wasn't worth it, and they've decided not to do it. You want? They've decided not to do it anymore. So getting a survey is incredibly difficult, and I would say of 80 to 90% of the closings that are not taking place on time are because we can't get our hands on a survey.
Okay, just 1 second. Bob, you need to mute your phone so it doesn't have background noise. That noise is coming from Bob's connection. So if Bob can turn the volume all the way down so we can't hear, he'll still be able to speak when he wants to.
Sorry.
He's working on it.
Got the mute on, got the thing on. You know what, I'll just get off so we.
He's just got to turn the volume down. That's all.
All right, he's gone. Any questions about surveys and abstracts and all of those issues? So the banks, I don't think the banks are behind in issuing commitment letters much more than a week or two. But what I think that they've done in order to issue commitment letters is they have put more contingencies into the commitment letter, more prior to conditions into the commitment letter, so that when people get a mortgage commitment, it really doesn't commit the bank to anything until you submit 37 other items. Bank attorneys need to give us what's called a clear to close, and the clear to close is what is really the go signal that the bank attorney is ready to schedule and we're ready for a closing. What some banks have started doing is they've started telling their customers that their credit is cleared. Credit cleared doesn't mean they're ready for closing. It just means that the bank has reviewed the prior two conditions and the credit is cleared. So now they have to review the title, they have to review other things, they have to get scheduled with the bank attorney. But people are hearing the words clear to close and they're coming to their lawyer saying we're cleared, when in fact they're not cleared to close, they're just credit cleared. It's just a dance that everybody's playing so that people can point the finger at everyone else when the closing doesn't take place timely. I think that most of the investors that I'm dealing with now are local. A lot of the out-of-state investors pulled back. They're nervous about how they're going to come into to Rochester to look at houses, how they're going to collect the rent. They're hearing horror stories about tenancies, but local people are still buying. I'm finding that I'm getting just as many contracts today as I was in August. So it's just a uniquely interesting situation. We're very busy. We're still getting stuff in. Any questions? Colleen, you must have a question about something.
You answer all my questions all the time, but
Is that the problem?
the one thing I do have a question about in regards to the C of O transferabilities for the two families, are the banks really aware that we have that wonderful rule about two families can't be transferred after 2 years? Are they?
The bank attorneys are all aware.
Okay.
The banks may not be aware.
Yeah.
The catch-22 to that is that if you call the bank and ask them, you're going to make them aware.
Right. Right.
And once you make them aware, then they're going to require you to get the certificate of occupancy. But if you don't ask them and we get to closing and they say, where's the certificate of occupancy? Everyone looks foolish. So it just really is a catch-22.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but Steve, it shows on record that CFO is good for 5 years, 5 or 6 years. So if you present that, is that fine enough?
Not for the banks that know that you need a transfer certificate of occupancy.
Gotcha.
I mean, that is what we do. We tell people it's good for 5 years, but everybody knows that it's not really good for 5 years if it's a 2-family.
And in regards to ESL and their rule about single family, you said owner occupied houses have to have a C of O now too?
Because when you're owner occupied, after the closing, you will apply to not have to get a C of O for a waiver.
Okay.
So their position is until you've applied for a waiver, there is no waiver. So you need a certificate of occupancy. To me, it's just an inconceivable argument when no one that lives in a house is going to get rejected for that waiver.
Yeah, right.
But it's, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So you have somebody owner occupied, and that owner occupied person is not required to have a C of O. They're selling to an owner occupied person who's going to get a waiver, yet the bank still insists that there be a C of O.
That makes a lot of sense, especially now.
There literally is no common sense to that problem.
All right, so one last question. You said about the filing evictions, and if you file today, you're looking at 2 months out. So would it be beneficial for me to tell my investors that have tenants who aren't paying and we're trying to work it out with them that they should really just file eviction now and see where it takes them? Or
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
I think that makes sense. The evictions are more complicated. There's a lot more appearances. There's a lot more paperwork. Things have to be on special colored paper. In every way, the deck is stacked against the landlord. So I think the sooner the better to try and get on a court calendar.
Okay, good, cool. Thank you.
And because it's just become such a morass and so much more difficult. I have been requested by a number of different property managers as to whether we want to do evictions because nobody wants to do evictions anymore. You're really going to get down to 3 or 4 law firms that are pretty much going to handle all of the evictions in Rochester.
Steve,
And I don't disagree with that because something as simple as an eviction has now become a specialty.
Yeah, because every day it changes.
Every day it changes. You got to be in court every day.
Yeah.
So, whether you use Jamie or you use John Naka or, there's a couple of other people that are doing it in significant numbers. I think it's just like a foreclosure. I would not handle a foreclosure. You have to hire someone that does foreclosures every single day to make sure the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And unfortunately, it's gotten to the same point with evictions.
Are they moving forward with foreclosures now?
No.
I didn't. Okay, I thought they hadn't changed it. Okay.
All the foreclosure lawyers are pretty much closed down. I know a number of them that are the lawyers are still on sabbatical.
Okay.
Large law firms have laid off hundreds of people because you don't realize with law firms like Feinsuch and Crane and Woods Oviatt and Boylan, or Boylan less so, and Phillips Lytle, that they may have 150 people working on foreclosures that they've had to lay off. They're on separate floors in their building. No one ever sees them, but it's huge numbers.
Yeah. Jeez.
Yes, and nobody gets it. Everybody's worried about the homeowner. Nobody's worried about the people holding the mortgage. Nobody's worried about the landlord. Everybody thinks that every landlord is Wilma Wright, and every mortgage holder is Wells Fargo. And,
Yeah, but-
and nobody thinks beyond that.
They think the landlords are the villains because they're asking for money to help pay for the house that the tenants are living in.
Correct. To
Yeah.
try, most of the time, to try and break even or
Yeah.
take 6 cents out if they're lucky. You know, it
No.
just doesn't make any sense. There are the advocacy groups for landlords and for mortgage holders just don't have the power that the advocacy groups for the tenants have. So let me see, what other questions? I do not believe small claims court is back in action. I think you're going to find that's pretty well closed down. I think the next couple of months, you're going to find the court system is almost entirely closed down, except for a little bit of virtual, as this virus just takes over our community completely. Whether, I mean, it used to be that I would say to someone in February or March, do you know anyone that has it? And no one knew anyone that had it. Now I've got two FFREIA members that I know of have it. A lawyer I'm very friendly with is in ICU. My daughter and her husband are doing well, but they had it. It's just affected everything. Are you doing, what are you doing with regard to open houses and inspections? Are you back to February, or are you still acting normal?
We're doing no open houses. I had 2 doubles listed on Parcells this week and plethora of people that wanted to come see them. I scheduled them all for the same time yesterday and then did traffic control, 1 party in at a time. Everybody waited in line, took an hour and a half until we got everybody through, but we eventually did. And we asked the tenants to leave the property. We turn on all the lights, open up all the doors, and just try and make it as COVID cautious as possible. And I had tenants that had newborn babies that were, concerned. And actually, if they had pushed against it, we wouldn't have obviously done it, but they were
Sure.
cooperative. No open houses though. I mean, I know there's some realtors out there that are trying to do it, but it's the same thing. They're waiting in line. Everybody's using hand sanitizer going in. It's not an easy.
Have you seen mask issues?
Everybody generally has a mask, but I did have last week, I was showing a 3-family in the South Wedge, and one of the tenants had a camera in their apartment, and it was the same thing. I had everybody come at the same time. I did traffic control, you in, you out, you in, you out, that kind of thing. We had, I think, 11 different agents that day, and somebody came in and they all had masks on when they went into the apartments. I did not go into the apartment with them. I was outside directing them to which door. Somebody went in and took their mask off when they went into the apartment, and the tenant obviously was very upset and sent me a picture and was not happy. So, we police it as much as we can, but behind
Sure.
closed doors,
You
it's
don't know
hard
what
to-
people are going to do.
Yeah.
You're right.
Excuse me, rarely see a tenant wear a mask.
Oh,
Even,
yeah.
they know we're coming. They know we're going through the house. They
won't.
don't let us in the door till we have them on, but they rarely do. Going to your question on inspection, Steve, one of the houses I sold last week, a double, actually for somebody on this call, offer was accepted and we have to have an inspection. But the next day, the tenant that was in the house when I showed it wound up in the hospital and is still there, tested COVID. So I'm under quarantine right now. I can't get an inspector to go in right now, obviously, to go do the house. So we're going to have to push that inspection out for a ways. And that was a contingency. So I don't know when we'll get in there, get that inspected. I don't know what the state is of the other people in the house and the other unit too. So
Sure.
yeah, I mean, inspectors those are people who are really checking with us to make sure everything is good in the house, because they obviously, that's their livelihood as well. And if they have to go under 2-week quarantine, that's a big hit for them.
There's no question about it. We're paranoid at the office. Law firms have done all different levels. There was one law firm that they took my temperature. I filled out a questionnaire, and now they're closed down because 3 of their paralegals had COVID. They were more proactive than any firm that I've worked with. But if it's going to hit you, it's going to hit you. And so everybody's working at home. Everyone's in quarantine.
So it's going about open houses. You know, the nice thing about directly listing a property and having to schedule showings is we can request to see things like a pre-qual ahead of time. We can request some COVID paperwork, and you know, we get those things. And so we keep the tire kickers out. That's why we request pre-qual sometimes. But open houses, anybody can line up outside to go and take a look at that house. We don't know who they are, who they're with, where they've been. You know, they could be a neighbor just always wanted to look inside that house. So, and the other thing, you got to give people time to go through houses, 15 to 30 minutes sometimes. And what I've showed up at open houses and seen a line of 19 groups outside. So I'm looking at it going, if everybody took 25 minutes, there's 9 hours. I'd be standing out there waiting to go in. So there are some agents still doing open houses. A lot of them tend to be the very high end properties, $400,000, $500,000, where you're maybe not going to get a ton of people coming to those. But I see them for, you know, your standard $150,000 house, and they get mobbed. So it's crazy. I don't think open houses should be going on right now. I like the way Colleen and I do it, very controlled. You know, we set a time mainly for investors. They want to go through a house. We don't bother the tenants, and it's done. We get offers after that, and the listing, we can shut it down.
That makes sense. Two of the 5 closings I have today and tomorrow are Zoom, because they're bank involved and just nobody wants to be in the room. Other closings that I have are literally, we're just getting the money and I'm signing the RPs and the TPs in favor of the client. We just really need to cut it down so as few as possible people are actually coming into the office. Questions? Bob, you must have a question.
I was gonna say, you know, perhaps redirect you back to either my set of questions or Pat's set of questions, because I don't think we've answered them all yet.
So Pat had a question. If you own a rental property worth up to $100,000, residential in Rochester, free and clear, what's the best protection you would recommend to put it under if you wanted to hold it long-term? Corporation, LLC, trust, etc. My feeling is the best way to hold title to a property is in an LLC. A corporation and an LLC protect you legally equivalently. One is not necessarily better than the other, but all of the accountants are very much in favor of LLCs for tax purposes. So I like to see my clients put their properties into an LLC. It protects you from all sorts of things, including the thing that you can't get insurance for, which is problems with lead paint. And I believe, Bob, didn't you have at one point an issue with a lead paint allegation? I think it's just impossible to protect yourself. Now, how the key issue with LLCs that I find is that people will put 15 or 20 houses in the same LLC, and then you end up with the LLC being like the individual. They have great value, when in fact you should probably have split into 2 or 3 or 4 LLCs. I do have one client who's a FFREIA member who puts every one of his properties into a separate LLC. When he sells that property, we reuse the LLC, but at one time he only has one property in that LLC. I'm not a huge believer in trusts. I think that an LLC truly takes advantage of everything that a trust could take advantage of. And what I like to say to people is that if you're dealing with something funky, you set up your corporation in South Dakota. You use a trust. When you get a buyer's attorney that has never seen a corporation from South Dakota or has never seen a land trust and doesn't know what to handle it, how to handle it, or what to do with it, you've just made the deal so much more complicated than if the property were in a New York State LLC. So I always believe that. The other thing to keep in mind, if you form an LLC or a corporation out of state, you cannot evict a tenant in Rochester City Court unless you file to do business, be authorized to do business in New York State. And the forms to do that are as expensive or more expensive than forming a brand new LLC. So I just find very little reason that anyone should be involved with foreign entities. And Pat also asked, what should we put in a lease to protect landlords in these crazy times? I don't know that there's anything that you can put in a lease. I think it's just a kind of a wait and see. I don't think you can protect yourself against what a market where things change every week as to how you can get a tenant out of a property. From my perspective, giving keys and giving money is probably the easiest and most successful way to get a tenant out. Just buy them out of the house.
Hey, Steve, the lead stuff does come up. You're absolutely right about that. We have that in our lease where the tenant has to initial after they read the subsection stating if the wall, house, frame, whatever is compromised by the slightest, they are to call us immediately so we can take care of and make safe. So we have that. Of course, you give the lead packets. I think we're going to get sued. I don't know, got one of those letters of intent type deals. And it's not my personal property, but it's more we are managing a property 3 years ago for someone that's not on our lease that states that their child got sick. And I know there's a valid C of O and a lead test right around that time frame. Again, we were never notified in that. So as far as us and a company, our management agreements do state to the owners that if any such actions come about, basically we're not responsible and so forth unless you can prove gross negligence and so forth. But that's what they're trying to say in this intent is we are negligent.
Well, yeah, because that's what they have to say. Absolutely.
Right. So
that is not to say that you won't win and get out of the lawsuit or collect it back from the landlord if it goes beyond that, but you still have the aggravation of defending, which is horrendous. And there's no good answer for that.
okay, because of course my insurance company, my liability holder won't defend me.
Correct. They won't play with you at all.
No. And I believe like most of these law firms that just do lead, they're fishing. They're fishing to see if someone will pick it up.
They're fishing for insurance. Correct.
Yeah. So we sent them all the denial letters and so forth. I haven't heard anything yet, but what I do is I've had a liability issue before where the attorney was looking at our assets. It got to that point where we could have been subject to that. So I keep no assets in my company. It's just a total pass-through admin company. GPM doesn't own anything. So would you recommend any other protection that companies can do, people who have companies?
No, but I think you should keep some assets in the company. If it's a total pass-through and it has absolutely no assets, I would not that there are many cases on it, but I would worry about those cases that pierce the corporate veil and say that you're not really a corporation or an LLC if you have not one single asset of any kind. So I would just be, I would have them own the desks and the telephone system, maybe a car, nothing of great value, but they should own something.
Okay. We do have those sorts of things, 7-10 computers, desk and all that. But I even have my fleet of vehicles in a separate LLC.
I'm not opposed to that, but I might leave one vehicle in that
Okay.
just to have another asset.
Okay.
But I'm certainly not opposed to having the fleet of vehicles separate.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
But the problem is if they do press it, which I don't think they will because they're just looking for insurance. If they do press it, it's just it'll cost you a significant amount of money just to defend whether you win or lose. And that's and that's why, you talk about, should I get title insurance? Shouldn't I get title insurance? So I did a transaction last year where title was very funky, and we cleaned it up to my satisfaction. And these are the title curatives for that closing that I charged a whopping $495 for. My client, unfortunately, lived in England and he's passed away. But he has an LLC, and we got served in a lawsuit. The lawsuit says that one of the owners there was a land trust, there were LLCs, there were all sorts of things. One of the owners screwed the other owner out of $150,000. It has absolutely nothing to do with my client. It has nothing to do with my capacity as a lawyer. But what they did is they named my client as an additional party to it. And they filed a lis pendens. They filed a lien against the house. So now we cannot sell that house. I turned it over to this is all very new. I turned the thing over to the title insurance company. Literally sent them a copy of that packet that I just showed you last week, and we're waiting to hear back. The argument of the plaintiff's lawyer, which just is bizarre, and it's a law firm in my building that is typically very competent. Their argument is that if one of the sellers engages in fraud against another one of the sellers, in some way they could end up getting my client a buyer for value, paid normal, no gift, nothing incestuous with my client and the other parties, that they could somehow get my client's house back. A bizarre position, but the reason that it pays to get title insurance, they probably paid $300, $400 for a title insurance policy. And I would guess if they really follow through, legal fees on this will be anywhere from $2,500 to $10,000. So it's just something that I never would have imagined could happen. I had another case with, I don't know if he's a FFREIA member or not. 3 years after closing, he gets a foreclosure notice from a bank that says they had a mortgage on the property. We go back to the title company. Well, first, after I put on more deodorant, we look at our file. We discover that there's nothing in my file, nothing in the abstract about that mortgage. The title company, lock, stock, and barrel, missed a $30,000 mortgage when they did the abstract. And my client owes that $30,000. And the title companies that did the abstract actually came right up and took 2.5 weeks. They paid the thing off in full. Life is perfect. They did what they needed to do. But you just don't know. You just don't know if people are going to do the things they're obligated to do. So that's twice in a 3 or 4 week period where crazy things happened. Questions? Let's see if we have any other questions on the list.
Good morning,
Go ahead.
Elliot. I have a question. I have a pending eviction case. My tenant is working with Catholic Family Center on one of the eviction prevention grants. Any information about if landlord accepts the eviction grant, what is the effect on later having to bring a new eviction if the tenant again is delinquent?
I would want to see what you signed to get the grant, but I would think that getting the grant once does not stop you from being able to evict them the second time.
Okay, I haven't yet gotten any paperwork. All I've gotten so far is a phone call from a caseworker at Catholic Family Center. But
Yeah, I
your
would
answer
just,
is what
I would
thought.
just ask them to provide you, they must have, even if it's just an information packet. Then if you send it to me, I'll take a look at it.
I would be glad to do so. Thank you.
Sure. Pat, am I missing any questions you had?
I think there's a few more on there.
We talked about the state of evictions, investor closings, LLCs, what we should have in leases.
I have a question regarding, we have all these new tax payments coming up first of the year. And we're obviously paying a lot of money for services we're not getting. Has anyone talked, or has there been any discussion on withholding tax payments?
Glenn, I wish that I could say to you that that would be a practical way of attacking the system, but I just don't think there'll be any benefit to it at all.
No.
Anybody disagree?
No, all they do if you don't pay your taxes is they pass it on to the county and then they lien you.
They
Yeah.
lien you, and you're dealing with these terrible people that have all of the liens. No, I don't think there's any benefit to that at all. When I had an interesting situation where my clients were allowed to go 3 months without paying their mortgage, and so it would be back-ended, and then they sold the house and we went to pay off their mortgage, and Bank of America made such a mess of the file that it took us 6 weeks to get a figure. My client, at my urging, sat in a Bank of America branch 35 hours over 8 days, refusing to leave without someone giving him a payoff statement so that we could sell his house. And so now he's applying for a mortgage. He has significant assets. His wife is a dentist. They're just in great shape. They have high numbers. Somehow it appeared on their credit report that they were delinquent in paying their mortgage, when it was Bank of America that went to them and said, we would be happy not to get payments for 3 months. People just need to be careful with these programs, that they're not stepping on their own toe. We did it. We got it all straightened out. They're going to get their new mortgage, but it's just a terrible amount of aggravation for no good reason. I can't hear you, Susan. I think you're muted.
Doug is sitting here, and I was saying something to him about the fact that even though I get maybe a credit card bill from Lowe's that says you don't have to pay this if you don't want to because of COVID, I always pay it anyways, because I know that there's going to be some sort of consequence after this is over, or even before it's over, but later, where it's going to ding something. And
yeah, I don't think there's any question. The computer systems that the credit bureaus use don't have a spot that says, "Did you not pay your mortgage because of COVID?"
Right.
It just doesn't fit the computer model. So yeah, you can just get into a lot of trouble very easily.
Yeah. You miss a payment, you miss a payment, whether you had permission to do so or not. is
That's my
irrelevant.
feeling.
Mhm.
Steve, one question of mine.
So hold on, Bob has a question.
Is Monroe County Court back in session?
Monroe County Court is not back in session.
Okay,
And I understand they are not going to be back in session for 6 months
okay,
for evictions.
okay.
So there will be no town evictions at all. Because the towns are not handling them. They're sending them to the county, and now the county is not going to be handling them.
Steve, I have a couple questions. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. So, first of all, I just want to answer Elliot's question about Catholic Family. So the only thing that you're going to sign from Catholic Family is a W-9. They don't send any paperwork regarding a contract that you can't evict the tenant or whatever. As soon as they send you the money, you're done with Catholic Family. If they default again, you can send to eviction. So that's not a problem.
That completely makes sense.
So they're just kind of, once they send the money, hands washed, they're done.
Thank you very much. You know, the only document I signed so far was the W-9.
Yeah. So then you should be expecting a check any day now.
Oh, great. You made my day. Thank you.
At least somebody's happy today.
How many months will I pay?
They'll go back, I believe, 5 months.
Wow.
But what we have found is that a number of people are being denied because they can't afford rent moving forward. So they're not going to help pay the back rent.
Such
So-
a catch-22.
Absolutely. So what we have done is, and I think Pat's shared this at other meetings, is what we've done is when we initially give Catholic Family like their ledger or whatnot, we write on there that we're willing to work with the tenant moving forward to make it affordable. So if Catholic Family is going to give me 5 months of back rent and I lower the rent by $300 to make it affordable for the next 4 months, absolutely, we're going to do it.
There's no
So,
question.
right. But
you're more practical than a lot of people out there.
Sometimes
I agree with you completely.
Yep. So, but we found that if we put it on that initial paperwork, they're not getting denied right away. They're actually going the extra step to work with us to make it affordable for the tenants. So hopefully that answers his question. And then Steve, I did have a question for you. I heard something a while back about legislation that they want to take away the landlord's rights to run a credit score on a prospective tenant. Have you heard anything about that?
Just that they in fact do want to do that, but I have not seen any legislation yet that does it. But I have heard the exact same rumor you have heard.
Is that, I mean, I just don't understand that. It's like a bank not running a credit score for an auto loan. So how is it legal? Could they legally do that though?
Until somebody challenges them and wins, it's legal, and it doesn't make any sense. But I would not be surprised if it was legal, because look at all of the other things they're doing on behalf of tenants. It just wouldn't surprise me at all.
Okay. And then one other thing, when you're going to court nowadays, and it's not a non-payment, it's a holdover. I know that they're not really allowing the marshals to serve the warrant, but are you finding much kickback from the judges on why you even asked this person to leave in the first place?
I think it does come up during the hearings. I don't necessarily think it has. There's no advantage to the answer. They can't use it against you. But no, I think they are asking that because they're very interested in is it COVID related? Why are you doing it? Did the people lose their job? Because everybody's worried about the poor tenant.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Back to your question, and maybe others, I don't know, but does anybody have any further updates on the 100 million that supposedly has been there for relief to landlords that we've only spent 40 million on? And are some of these, and Pat, maybe with your meeting with the city, are these questions being asked in terms of further leniency on some of these people that they've disqualified? I guess the basic question is to the forum, and Steve yourself, is does anybody know of any other additional relief? Because many of us have submitted multiple people, and in my particular case, I've gotten one that's gone through, which is really disappointing because there's probably $70,000 out there of people who have not paid, that don't want to pay, but should qualify for some type of relief, and right now aren't, and it's a gridlock. Any thoughts?
Hey, Bob, I mean, 40 million was spent mostly downstate, but, and Beth knows more about this than me, but the agencies that are in charge of processing and delivering money are understaffed. They're overwhelmed. So yeah, you got all this money, but if you can't disperse it because you don't have the personnel, what good is it? It's just a total, so the state loves to say, oh, we got all this help. Yeah, but it's not getting dispersed. So
The
Beth,
other
you wanna
thing
add on
with
that?
Yeah, so the other thing with that is, they had this window open for 2-3 weeks for tenants to apply. I think it was June or August. And we actually had a tenant move out because she couldn't afford rent anymore. She did the right thing, moved out. And we got a check for her back rent this week. So
From who?
from the state through that program. So from what I understand, the state was doing one mass mailing for all the payments. Well, if they would have submitted the payment in time, she still could have been in her house. So I think that's just messed up. But I was telling Pat this morning that I did research when Cuomo did that. I'm sorry.
No,
Okay,
but I was
so-
talking about, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. So when Cuomo did the order last week to lower the standard so more people qualify, I was searching to see if tenants have to reapply or if they're just running everything again, like reprocessing the applications to see if more actually qualify. And I couldn't find answers. So I don't really know. I would love to know where that other 60 million is going to go, if they're just redoing everything or if people have to reapply, but I wasn't able to find anything.
So we don't know, since everything's going to get extended, we know it's going to get extended past December 31st or January, but we don't know if the programs are going to get extended.
Right.
I would agree. We have no idea, but I can't conceive that they're not going to get extended. So I bet they get extended to April.
I don't know, because the money has to be returned to the federal government like January 15th or something, doesn't it? Isn't that part of the thing? If they hadn't spent it by January, it's gone. It goes back to the Fed.
They have to spend it by December 31st. And I'm just wondering how they're going to spend all that money so quickly when they've denied so many people. So are they redoing everyone's application or not?
Well, you know what? I've talked to many in the field, and those that own B plus properties and higher, they're still high 90s for rent collection. Those that own C properties, you're rolling your dice. So I suggest not having any mortgages on C properties. C properties can do wonderful. They can do great. Know your tenant, know your tenant, know your tenant. But statistically, out of all of our units and evictions and all that, it's primarily dominated by C and below are the ones utilizing all our time, all our resources, and they're not paying. So again, I just, when you look at what's going to happen in 6 months or a year, I think you're going to see a lot of properties, to see properties on the market maybe next year. Maybe there'll be some deals, but the B plus, man, they're holding strong. They're holding strong.
Any other questions? All right, Bob, you're on.
No, just to Pat's comment, I think that's true what he just said. I think a big part of that, though, is it's a matter of the family and the individual that you can attract, because I have C properties, B minus properties with great tenants that stay and are responsible. But then I also have the opposite end of the spectrum as well too. And I have those that, of course, snowball us, right? They come in, they look great and wonderful for 3 months, and then they start going south. And with COVID, I mean, pre-COVID, from a management perspective, we could effectively deal with that, you know, through the court system or cash for keys or whatever. But now in COVID times, those people are a real thorn in our side. And they're a real thorn in our side too when it comes to selling situations, because I feel for the real estate people who have to deal with these things too in the transactions. And oftentimes they become front and center in terms of those sale transactions. Not about the house anymore. It's about the status of the tenants and whether they're paying or not, whether they have COVID. And, you know, it's just crazy. But anyway.
And you know, oh, go ahead, Bob. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, I want to thank Steve very much for devoting his time to this today, and everybody's participation and questions. Sorry for the technology glitch at the beginning, and Andy, thanks for getting us back on board. Pat, any other thoughts, or are there any other questions out there?
Like Steve said too, cash is king. So it's worked out many times for me, buying properties with people in there, and next week they're gone. So don't let emotions affect a smart, calculated move. So when you're ready and nice and clear, because we've all been frustrated, very frustrated. Just some of the entitlement out there, but it's easy to let that consume your day and then say, forget about this stuff. I'm out of Rochester. I'm done. Beth just
You're
says,
right.
you know,
Yeah.
I've had those days. I'm sure we've all had these days, and some of the logic that comes back to us from some tenants. I'm like, is this the United States or what? I mean, I don't get it. But Beth sent me some numbers, and October we were at 89% collected, and we're pretty heavy in CC plus. And October 89%, November is 80, December's at 59, but it's early. Okay, so I mean, overall, it's not the worst.
How does that compare to pre-COVID?
We were mid 90s all the time. So
That's excellent. I mean,
I think that's great. Yeah, I agree.
I think you're still way above the average. But, you know,
it's just challenging. You know, it's just the resources. We can't get to other property management stuff because we are constantly on collections, holding hands, going over there, making whatever it takes to fill out the forms, and some of the other stuff I just can't get to readily. I know this is temporary, but just, I know, try not to let it ruin your day every day. So.
How does that equate to Section 8 payments on your Cs and stuff? Obviously, those are still rolling in as they should, or has there been any type of disruption for you guys on your Section 8 money?
I mean, they're go ahead.
I'm going to take this one, Pat. Section 8 is, I'm frustrated with Section 8 right now because there's nothing we can do as far as getting the tenants to pay. So the tenants can reach out to Section 8 and say their income changed, but in most cases their income has not changed. So Section 8 is not going to pay more, but the tenants are not paying their portion. In the past, we've been able to take them to court, get a judgment, and then once the tenant realizes that they can lose their Section 8 due to the judgment, they pay really, really quick. We can't get them in court, so they're just not paying. And of course, we notify Section 8. Section 8 sends that typical form letter, you could lose your benefits, but the tenants know they don't have to pay. So we are even notifying Section 8 nowadays, even if they owe $1, I really don't care. But we have Section 8 tenants who owe thousands of dollars, and until we can actually get them in court to get the judgment, I don't think they're gonna pay.
I have one more question about holdover tenants. I've been switching my 1-year leases to month-to-month leases. I haven't had to do a holdover eviction, but I'm wondering, just is it easier now to get a eviction for a holdover than for a non-payment?
I think it's always easier to get an eviction for a holdover than a down payment. That's why I've always been a proponent of month-to-month leases, because it gives you that play. There's other than if you are reacting to someone making a complaint, whether it be to the city for property issues or a sexual complaint or anything like that, holdover is the best way to go.
Steve, thanks for that. I agree. We used to do year leases because sometimes they just want to move just to be with their friends, and that would cost the landlord money. But with now, nope. No, I agree with you, Steve. Month to month.
Thanks. No, I really, I've always thought that. I've had that debate with clients for years, and now even more so.
I agree.
Anybody?
So I have a question. How does that impact your 1-year occupancy guarantee and your placement fee for putting a tenant in there if you're on a month to month instead of an annual?
You had to ask that, right? No. We still do the 1-year guarantee. And I'll have to run my numbers to see if we're losing out on that. But we're still doing that.
I'll bet you're not.
Yeah, so far it's good. People are staying.
All right, well, I guess we'll wrap it up then. Thanks so much, folks, for joining. Happy holidays, and make it a great day. It looks like it's going to be a fairly decent, warm one today. So any outside things to do them today.
Thanks for joining, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right, we'll see you. Bye-bye.
Awesome, Steve. Thank you.